Candelas,
Present.
Ortiz,
Present.
Foley, Davis,
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
Thank you.
We have four. Foley's not going to be here today, so we can do in-person voting, yeah. All right, before we begin, we want to remind everybody that we should follow our code of conduct. Includes commenting on specific agenda items and addressing the full body. Public speakers will not engage in a conversation with the chair, council members, or other specific members of staff. All members of the committee, staff, and public are expected to refrain from abusive language. Failure to comply with the code of conduct, which will disturb, disrupt, or impede the orderly conduct of this meeting, will result in removal from the meeting. And we're starting with a review of the work plan. We're swapping one item off of today's agenda with an item that originally had been scheduled for June. Those are items 1 and 2 under work plan. So I will entertain a motion to combine 1 and 2 to defer the urban forestry report and move the regional transportation activity report to May.
Motion to do exactly what you just said.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, let's go to public comment.
Caller with a number ending in 1324. Caller with the number ending in 1324. You're unmuted. All right, I'm going to move on to Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks for the meeting today. Happy May 1st to everyone. What was I going to say? Oh, to talk about the regional transportation semi-report issues. Good luck with that topic matter of discussion. It's important to ourselves. I think you know my feelings on such matters. I think I'll bring these things up better during the regular agenda today, and hopefully we'll have a good meeting today. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
All right, let's move on to vote on the work plan.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. Now we're on to consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve consent? There's one item on consent.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, we have a motion and second. Are there any public comment?
Who was the seconder for that motion?
Domingo.
Candelas, yes.
There are no public comments.
All right, we'll vote on the consent calendar.
Unanimous.
Okay, now we'll move on to the first report to committee. This is item 2 on the agenda. We deferred item 1. So item 2 is the Regional Transportation Semi-Annual Report, and we'll let John Risto kick us off.
Good afternoon, John Risto, Director of Transportation. For this item, we do have some guests I'd like to introduce. Online, we've got Michelle Broussard is going to be addressing the committee. She's the Executive Director of Caltrain, and with us here at the booth is Casey Fromson. She's going to be doing a presentation on update of Caltrain electrification, and we've got Jessica Zink, Deputy Director of DOT. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, and she is online.
Great. John, thanks so much. Really appreciate the introduction. Council members, I'm Michelle Bouchard, the Executive Director for Caltrain. I'm joined by Casey Fromson, who is in the room with you. She is our Chief of Communications. We wanted to thank you so much for this opportunity to present this item. It's one of the most transformational programs that we have ever had with Caltrain. And it's transformational in many respects. It's transformational for our riders, it's transformational for the communities through which we operate, and it's transformational for the environment. And so the reason why we love being able to present to you today is because we think the benefits of this project sync up really nicely with the committee's goals of promoting environmental sustainability, efficient transportation, and enhancing economic vitality. We have been in active construction on this program since 2017 when we issued notices to proceed, and now we're in the home stretch. This next year, it'll be critical for us as we've intensified work on the right-of-way to complete the power system that will be propelling our brand new trains. My hope is if you haven't seen these trains, 4 of them live just up the street from you in our maintenance facility. We will be having a few events over the course of the next year to be able to highlight that we are about to be in revenue service. And in fact, many of you will be able to see trains that are actually being tested in the summer, as right now we're seeking to finalize the testing on the southern end of our traction power system. We could not have made it to this point on this project without a wealth of support from, yes, our riders, but also our community and city partners. And we wanted to truly thank you for your support. I think there is one important and visible example of that support in the fact that over the course of the last several months, we have been lucky enough to complete our project budget through grants from the federal government, but most notably from the state of California. Never would have gotten those funds if it weren't for all of the support that we received and was conveyed to the governor and the Department of Transportation. So the punchline is we will be having revenue service on this corridor in these new trains by the fall of 2024. We've got a ton of work to continue to do in terms of completing the construction, but also in terms of transitioning Caltrain's organization from one that currently operates just diesel trains to one that maintains and operates electric trains. So with that, I also want to give a special thanks to Vice Chair Davis for her leadership on the Caltrain board. She's been a critical source of support and advice and policy guidance over the course of the last 6 years. So really appreciate that. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Casey so she can run you through our presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Casey Fromson, Chief Communications Officer. Thank you so much for having us here today. I want to start by thanking my 2 colleagues on my right and left. The city has been really, really amazing to work with, and I deeply appreciate the support that your staff has provided throughout the history of this project and for the many other projects that we're working together on. Michelle stole most of my thunder, so I basically just get to give the pictures, and so that's always helpful. And just a recap, so you're getting in one more time kind of a little bit more details of where we are on the electrification project. Say anything? Just a reminder of the Caltrain corridor. It's 77 miles from San Francisco all the way down to Gilroy, but you'll notice here there's kind of a difference between those two, and it's important to explain why. Caltrain owns the portion of the corridor between San Francisco and Tamian Station in San Jose. So when we talk about the electrification project and the improvements that we're doing specifically with this project, it's occurring within that corridor, because the portion south of that is owned by Union Pacific, which is a freight railroad line. We certainly have other projects and plans in the works, and we'll talk about those, but the focus today will be on the portion of the corridor that Caltrain owns. A few of the other statistics up there is that it's a really unique system. Commuter railroads across the country typically go into one job center, but Caltrain has always had a bi-directional commute. So while there are many people traveling into San Francisco, the second busiest station is actually in Palo Alto, and Deardawn's number 3. So Silicon Valley and all those places that we serve, it's really going in both directions that we see people traveling on the corridor. We have many at-grade crossings, including several in San Jose, so we are working on some overall efforts to look at a corridor approach to that. And then you can see where we were pre-pandemic. One statistic there that speaks to some challenges we have financially is on the fare box side. So Caltrain used to have 70% of its operating funds come from the fares we got from riders. We're still at a lower ridership point today than what we want to be in the future, and so that provide some challenges for us, and we're again working with lots of partners to see what we can secure at the state level for that, as well as potentially a regional one. But we have a strong corridor that has so many different communities up and down of it, and we're really happy and pleased that we're right around the corner from electrifying it. So let me give you a few details about that. Before we hit those details, a few more high-level concepts to know is the Caltrain board in 2019 adopted a 2040 service vision. So it made sure that we were thinking about, after we electrify, what are some of the other projects and plans we want to have on the horizon? And as part of that vision, we talked about, well, let's have the infrastructure in place to be able to carry the equivalent of 5.5 lanes of freeway capacity on Caltrain. So we articulated that, and that's something that over time we can incrementally invest in after we electrify. But some of those components include high-speed rail will eventually be on the Caltrain corridor. So it will actually go on the Caltrain tracks and use the infrastructure that we're putting in place for the electrification project. It includes a project in San Francisco, the downtown extension, the San Jose Diridon rebuild, grade separations. So there's a whole lot of other efforts that are happening on the corridor that we're a part of and that we want to see as part of that vision in that future. And then kind of moving into where we are today, I really get excited about this because it is such a moment in our history that Abraham Lincoln was the president when people started first riding Caltrain as a passenger service, and you can see it was a steam system. Now we've had diesel trains for many years, and we are all at this moment in time, we're about to see a huge transformation, and it'll be an electrified system that is in place next year. So a few details about that. We're putting in an overhead contact system. So it's poles and wires, and then replacing 75% of our fleet with from diesel trains to brand new electric trains. As part of that overall vision, we want to get to 100% fully zero emission corridor, and we have some grant opportunities that we're going after. We're also working on with the state of California about a battery electric train that will be able to go down on that Gilroy portion. So even though we're doing 75% with this project, we have plans to have a fully zero emission corridor in the future. A few details about the project. The foundation, so we had over 3,000 of those in place throughout the corridor. It's over 150-year-old corridor, so you can imagine we were very pleased when we stopped digging in the ground and finding interesting things there, and are now the vast majority of the work is above ground. So it's really putting the final touches in getting the last few poles in place, stringing the wire, putting the traction power facilities in there, and then doing this integrated testing, as Michelle mentioned, that really puts all the pieces together. We already have a couple train sets on the corridor. You can see the pictures of them now, and we expect to have revenue service, so that means passengers on trains by September of next year, and we are very, very happy that the project is fully funded. As Michelle mentioned, we had some challenges there, but we now have every single dollar in place to get this project done. So as I told Pranay, our project lead, now it's his turn to make sure the project just gets finished on time. A couple pictures for it. As Michelle said, we are very excited to have the public be able to get on these trains. The experience that riders are going to have compared to what they have today is night and day. So not only is it kind of a clean, slick design, but even in the bathrooms we have baby changing tables, which I know Jessica and I have talked about having little kids now. You know, I didn't have kids when I started this project 10 years ago, but I do now, and I appreciate that we're going to have amenities such as that. And we'll have Wi-Fi on there. We'll have plugs at every seat. You know, it really is going to be something that we should be proud of in Silicon Valley. If this is what we want transportation to look like, and we're about to deliver it. There are certainly many different safety features on these trains that are enhancement over what we have today, including everything from braking performance to new crashworthiness standards. The sustainability and energy independence, I think this committee probably can understand going from 30-year-old diesel trains, which is what we have out there today, which are some of the oldest in the state, to brand new state-of-the-art electric trains is a huge leap on our path of doing our part to fight climate change. And we're really proud of what this is going to mean for the corridor and for all the communities along it. We spent a decent amount of time looking at our job kind of history and where we created it. And really, for a project that's in California, you may not always think about it, but we have literally created jobs in 36 different states. And so we've gone back through that job kind of train and through our suppliers to see where those are from. And that has also helped us as we've gone after funding for different large federal sources of having partners in other states be part of this and really show that these big mega projects really do impact the whole country. One place that we like to highlight, and I know that Councilmember Davis has been there herself, that is in Utah. And so Utah is actually where the trains are being built. And this facility was created in large part because they secured the first contract with Caltrain. And so they have now over 400 employees there, a whole local apprenticeship program there. It's Buy America, and this is one we just like to highlight that, these projects really can create jobs across the country and then help strengthen and deepen our partnership in other areas. And then one of the last slides we have on here is just recognizing that, it's about the people and the communities that we're going through. And so this slide highlights where our equity priority communities are and that we're going to provide to them a much cleaner air to get on. And then we're also going to improve the service. And so because of the performance of these electric vehicles, we'll be able to provide more service and cleaner service to all the communities along the corridor. And then the last one is just to end on our level of support. We're not going to go into lots and lots of slides here, but we're happy to take questions. But we really could not have been here without the support on so many different levels. And as Michelle said, we started construction in 2017, have gone through a pandemic, but now we are at the very end of this project and so excited to deliver this to all the communities and the supporters that have been with us throughout this process. So we wanted to say thank you and open it up for any questions that you may have on the project.
Well, thank you so much for that report, Casey, on this really important project. Let's start with public comment.
Paul?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello,
We can hear you, Paul.
Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. That report was painful to listen to. It's a joke, it's a mock, and I'm going to tell you why. Number one, equity, you're abusing that word. Don't do it again. Get equity out of your mouth and quit talking about it. Because we're not concerned with your version or your interpretation of what equity means to us. You see, because that train runs through my barrio. You need to learn a little bit of history. The reason why that train ran through that barrio, it was so it could institute Willow Glen as a city in 1927. And that is what formed the Masonic Lodge in Willow Glen, the one that's sitting back of Cathedral of Faith. So it was racism that put that line through there. So you mock equity when you start talking about it. So like, just get that out of your presentations. Number two, this is why Google has stopped construction. See, because you have to have this infrastructure in place first so that Google can be built on top of it. That's why. So you guys are a joke, man. I mean, you guys are lying to the people. You continue to lie. And my role as a citizen of this community is continue to check you on your sociopathic line to the public, because that's what you're doing. You're going to demolish half of the houses in the barrio, in the Horseshoe, because 4 tracks have to go through there. Remember, I have 6 years of consistent attendance at these meetings, so I can connect the dots. And when you're lying, and I know when you're lying, and I can call you out when you're lying because I have a photographic memory. I remember the documents that I read, so I know what I'm talking about. Go back and double check them, and you'll see that everything that I'm telling you right now is verbatim true. It's a fact. So quit lying and keep equity out your mouth.
Blair?
Hi, I'm Blair Beekman here. As this item is called the Regional Transportation Activities Quarterly Report, it's got a bunch of transportation activities on it that I hope I can talk about at this time, if that's okay with everyone. There is a few items about regional highway projects and rail and transit things, and that includes BART stuff, high-speed rail, Diridon Station, Diridon to the airport. Boy, a real reminder that really be considering the morale of VTA light rail drivers as you make decisions about the future of airport use. Just think about them. Think about how they can be happy and content in this process. Do something positive for them as you're thinking of the airport project. A reminder that it's my understanding that the BART tunneling won't start happening until at least the summer of 2024, because the tunneling equipment won't be here until then. An important thought to consider, and that I think it's important to really honestly consider in the future of high-speed rail, how high-speed rail can be a part of, of an entire Bay Area experience. And I know you guys want to really focus on it being coming through San Jose, but I mean, there's chances and choices that high-speed rail can be serving the other through the other corridors of the East Bay that I hope we can learn to more openly talk about, be cooperative about, and I think that would just make for a more enjoyable process for everyone. And an important reminder of that. And to conclude, as always, always be considering that we're moving towards a public safety future. That what open public policies and accountability, how that adds and lends to the importance of public safety. It adds to community harmony and our better selves. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
All right, thank you. I know that Councilmember Davis would love to talk a little bit about this, so I'll let her start.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Michelle and Casey, for your presentation. First, can you address there was a public comment that talked about 4 tracks and having to take homes. Can you address that issue?
So as part of the electrification project, we're not doing any of that work. The project really is installing an overhead contact system. So those are poles that are on our right-of-way and getting brand new trains. And so there's not additional large takes. There's no tracks. I think that would be a reference to maybe some of the other future projects that are in the works.
Yeah, and Jessica Zank, I'll build on that briefly because the caller, Mr. Soto, was accurately remembering that in the Diridon Station oriented work a few years ago, as we looked at the number of trains coming into and out of Diridon Station, there is the potential for 3 or 4 tracks, 3 or 4 tracks south of Diridon Station in the future. Today, there's only 2. And so that is likely what he was thinking of, and he's absolutely right that is the analysis to date, that 3 or 4 tracks would be the maximum potentially needed. And there was an early analysis that could include some backyards or homes, but it is, in my recollection, roughly 20 or fewer in that 4-track outside potential option. And it is not a done deal at all. That's a future outside chance.
Thank you. I appreciate that reminder. And that is, again, I just want to echo what you've said, Jess, that's for the expanded Diridon Station plan, which is really just a concept right now, and also would require high-speed rail to have firm plans on what their schedule is, and also the Caltrain business plan is going to be we're going to have a second look at that after electrification is complete, because the pandemic upended all of our projections for what ridership would be by which year. So I just wanted to make that very clear for all of the public. And yes, there is no more property takings because the Caltrain electrification project is well underway, and we are actually only a year and a half from completion and actual service. There are trains that are already here, which is very exciting. And there's tons of work going on. So if you've been at Diridon Station recently, you'll already see the overhead contact system is up. We've got poles and wires and all kinds of good stuff. And if you're ever crossing a Caltrain track now in the South Bay, all of that stuff is already up. They started with our area first because we've got the maintenance facility here in San Jose. So it's very exciting, and I'm really just want to really kind of ditto what you've said about the equity piece as well. Being able to have faster midday service, being able to have more weekend service is very important for folks who don't have regular 8 to 5 schedules. And there are a lot of people who live along the corridor who are going to benefit from reduced and really eliminated emissions because we will be running electric trains rather than diesel spewing into the air. So those are very important features of this project that I'm really proud to have been a part of. So again, I want to thank you for your report, and I am really excited to have Caltrain be electrified by fall of 2024.
All right, Councilmember Candelas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I too, immediately prior to the appointment, I was an avid Caltrain user on my way to Stanford University every, couple days a week. I too am very excited to see the electrification and the electric service. But I did want to commend my colleague, Vice Chair Davis, because I know without her leadership, we would not, and her push for Wi-Fi, I know we would not have Wi-Fi enabled trains. So want to just publicly commend her and give her kudos, because I know she's been a stern advocate for that. So kudos to that, to you, Vice Chair Davis. And, I'm excited to see it move forward and to be a writer. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we're going to try to figure out, after Councilmember Davis terms out, how to keep her on the Caltrain board. We'll look into that. I did have first of all, I want to thank you also for the presentation. This is one of the most important transportation projects that's happening anywhere in California for sure. I mean, the dirty diesel trains, the great trains have always been an important part of the infrastructure, but diesel trains are particularly dirty, and we've kind of lived with it, but we shouldn't have to much longer, and I'm glad we won't be living with it much longer on that corridor. Just a couple of questions. As part of this, are all the grade separations on the peninsula complete, or they'll be complete by next year? Is that?
Oh man, that would be amazing. I'd have a very different presentation if that was the case. Unfortunately not. And so there are almost 70 at-grade crossings along the entire Caltrain corridor, so around 30 in the portion that Caltrain owns, and there's 20 or so that are active right now. The city of San Jose has several, and there's several other in different stages, close to construction readiness to still in the design phase. What we are undertaking, which we are was a much needed thing and actually spun out of the Caltrain business plan is there a way for us to be thinking about grade separations at a corridor level? Are there some efficiencies that we could have? Are there some consensus building, funding that we can put together? And so when we advocate for funding and grade separations on the corridor, we can do it with a corridor lens versus what happens today is everyone really works on their own crossing and we kind of support each other, but it's everyone's doing their own. And with that many crossings and the magnitude that was in the business plan, put that at $11 billion. And so that was finished in 2019. So I imagine the number has gone up and not down. This is a hidden mega project that we really have to put some thought into. And so we have monthly meetings with elected officials throughout the corridor to start to think about that corridor lens that we could put on grade separations, and is there something that we can do better than what we've done in the past? If we want to continue to increase service, we really do need to make sure that that east-west connection works well for communities along with it. So this project is not doing anything with the grade crossings, but we have many projects that are actively underway, and then this corridor level, we call it a strategy that's also underway to see what we can do better on that front.
All right, thank you. And I guess this leads to my next question. It's all related, because obviously the goal is that these tracks and I talked to Jessica a little bit about this, but these tracks will be used for high-speed rail eventually. It's going to be a shared system. And I know obviously high-speed rail will need grade separation to be part of high-speed rail. Is that most of the expense of what high-speed rail needs to do to convert, to make sure that your system will be usable by their system?
Okay. So we obviously work very closely with high-speed rail since we're putting in infrastructure that is going to be compatible. So the same infrastructure we're putting in place for the Caltrain electrification project is what they're putting in place in the Central Valley. Now, their service kind of parameters in the Central Valley are much different than what they would be doing on the Caltrain corridor, where they would be going no faster than 110 miles per hour, and they are not legally required to grade separate. So you'll see in their plans that they do not have any funding in place for grade separations along the corridor. It doesn't mean that it's not desired and shouldn't be in place for many communities. And I think, that is one of the reasons that Caltrain is stepping forward to see what we can do to continue to advance those. But just factually, it's not part of their project that they've defined.
And Councilmember, I'd only add that what prompted your question is partially kind of a table articulating the cost increases of the high-speed rail project in various segments. And so while we're going to search down the actual article, the actual table, and get a more complete answer, our colleagues at High Speed Rail have given some sense of why this could be. They're not familiar with the article, but they basically boiled it down to three things. One of which is, depending on how the article pulled together the information, there's an overlap within the San Jose to San Francisco and then San Jose to Gilroy and beyond to Merced segments that they could be double counting if they pulled it together without a lot of consultation with high-speed rail. The other basic issue is that going through the environmental process, which High Speed Rail did recently, gave a lot more information about precisely what was needed beyond just electrification for the project. So that could include, station modifications or where poles may need to change for speed or curvature issues. And then the light maintenance facility was also not really well understood at the beginning of the process. So that's what they can tell you without having access to the article, but we'll definitely follow up for.
Yeah, and I just opened it in front of me so I could see what it said again.
Okay, good.
But it was the table talked about the escalation in cost of high-speed rail, and interestingly, in Northern California, they were talking about cost changes from their last estimate in 2022 versus 2023, so it's a one-year change. That the segments from San Jose to Gilroy and Gilroy across to Central Valley had no changes in cost, but the only change in cost was on the San Jose to San Francisco segment, which they had a year ago said would be 1.7 billion and now is saying would be 5 billion. It was a 200% increase in cost, and so I was curious as to why that segment, especially since work's being done now, would cost that much more. Again, you could be right. I mean, it might be how they got their data and how it's being counted. But their total amount is 5 billion, so that doesn't even include the grade separation. That also, you clarified that for me as well, that's not part of what this escalation is in their cost.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a curiosity, not something that we can necessarily dig into today, but I guess I'm interested eventually in understanding how their system will be compatible with what you're doing and what will need to be done to make sure that high-speed rail eventually will be able to get all the way to San Francisco. Although it'll be way past all of our tenures when that happens, unfortunately. And what is the total cost of what's been done just for the electrification project?
It's a $2.44 billion project.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Anyone else before we make a motion, accept a motion to accept the report?
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's vote.
It's unanimous.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the update.
Thank you so much for having us.
The next item, number 3 on the agenda, is our Vision Zero update. John,
Thank
we'll
you
let some of the
again.
other folks come down.
John Risto, Director of Transportation, and joining me here is Lam Cruz, our Division Manager for Traffic Safety, Lieutenant Sherry with San Jose Police Department, and Jesse Mintz-Roth, our Program Manager for Vision Zero, and Jesse will be doing the presentation for us today.
Thank you. My name is Jesse Mintz-Roth, and I'm the Vision Zero Manager from DOT. In this presentation, I will talk about traffic fatality numbers. I want to acknowledge that although they are represented here in numeric form, that these are people who are someone's loved ones, friends, or neighbors. By giving these presentations and working on the many initiatives I'll be touching on today, I and we at the Department of Transportation are working with you to reduce traffic fatalities and severe injuries. On the left side of the graph above, it shows how San Jose traffic fatalities have doubled in the last 10 years. And that in 2022, we had the highest number of traffic fatalities on record, with 65 traffic fatalities, following a 3-year tie for the previous high of 60 traffic fatalities in 2015, 2019, and 2021. On the right graph, it shows how 2022, in the yellow line, started out with 10 traffic fatalities in January 2022 alone and continued its unprecedented steep slope until April 2022. The other corridors in the year had more typical slopes compared to recent years. The orange bars represent the ranges from the last 5 years of traffic fatality data by month. The year 2022 started higher than any January on record, stayed high, and ended highest. Although 2023 is not shown on the slide, it's worth noting that 2023's numbers are a lot lower. As of today, May 1, there are 13 traffic fatalities that come from 12 crashes, compared to 30 on the same date in 2022. 10 of the 13, or 77%, are people killed while walking. This very high percentage is among the reasons we're working with a consultant on a pedestrian safety plan in the districts with the most traffic fatalities, which I will describe on a later slide. To go into the 2022 traffic fatality trends, people killed while walking made up 32 or 49% of traffic fatalities in 2022, also the highest on record. 63% occurred in dark hours. 28% had speeding as a contributing factor. 82% occurred on major roadways with posted speed limits of 35 miles per hour or higher. In 2022, several roadways, major roadways not designated as priority safety corridors, saw an unusually high number of fatalities, such as Santa Teresa Boulevard and parts of White Road. These new trends point to the need to update the priority safety corridors using newer data. We worked with data scientists to update our priority safety corridors using 2017 to 2021 5-year crash data, which was the most recent data years available. They explored using different methodologies used in California cities, and the one we selected is very similar to San Francisco's. It takes into account minor and moderate injuries while still putting more weight on fatal and severe injuries. We heard interest from our elected officials in including minor and moderate injuries, and in a city this large, we agree that this will give us a bigger data set of injury crashes, with the notion that an injury from the same crash can differ by person, such as a young adult versus an older adult, and that a minor or moderate injury can be very close to a severe or fatal one. In adding more priority safety corridors, we're moving from covering about a third of fatal and severe injuries to almost half. This is in alignment with other Vision Zero cities. I'd like to note that we kept our 27 priority safety corridors where projects were completed, and we will consider removing them if our data shows that fatal and severe injuries have gone down. Our findings show that 40 to 45% of minor and moderate injuries are included on the new priority safety corridor map released today. There were 17 streets on 70 roadway miles before, which was 3% of San Jose's roadway network, and now there are 30 streets totaling 150 miles, which is 6% of the San Jose roadway network. And 68% are within equity priority areas defined by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So basically the way that the map on the right side works is that the new priority safety corridors are in blue, the equity priority areas are in the yellow background, and streets highlighted in yellow have had recent Vision Zero safety improvements, and they will be evaluated for project performance and injury reduction after 1 year of after data is available and entered into our system. Moving to accomplishments and upcoming work. In the 2022 to 2023 fiscal year, we built 9.2 miles of quick build projects on the 2017 Priority Safety Corridor map. And upcoming work includes 14.1 miles on the 2017 Priority Safety Corridor map. With today's release of the 2023 Priority Safety Corridor Map, this will open up more project coordination opportunities. Moving to grants on the priority safety corridors, DOT received $74 million in grants for capital construction last year, of which $55 million was on priority safety corridors and at fatal and severe injury locations. The largest single grant received was $36.3 million from the OBAG program for Story Road and Key Street, and the second largest was a state earmark for $10 million for Center Road. Right now, working with a consultant, we're rolling out the Vision Zero program's first professionally produced behavior change, safety messaging, and speeding reduction campaign called Slow Down San Jose. The first billboards have begun to be installed, including one on Santa Clara Street, just a few blocks east of City Hall. The campaign will run for 3 months in 3 languages and include billboards, bus shelters, street light poles, laminated posters on the street, radio ads, digital ads, broadcast radio ads in Spanish and Vietnamese, digital ads including social media, digital streaming, and audio and video. And we'd like to thank the VTA for contributing 30 transit shelters and 10 bus tails. Our consultant will also be working with community-based partners, attending events, and distributing outreach materials, and there will be an evaluation of the campaign afterwards. In addition to the speeding reduction campaign, the Vision Zero program has several other outreach and engagement programs, including changeable message signs for Distracted Driving Awareness Month, which was April, such as the one shown in the picture on the right, which says, "Eyes up, phones down." Spanish and Vietnamese in-language engagement for street safety projects, a new engagement plan to talk directly with unhoused people near traffic fatality locations where unhoused people have been involved as pedestrians, a school area safety survey that recently went out to principals of all 260 schools in San Jose, and assisting the police department with advertising the many openings in the Adult Crossing Guard program. The San Jose Vision Zero Task Force, founded in September 2020, recently had its 10th meeting on Thursday last week, which was also its first in-person hybrid meeting held here at City Hall in compliance with State Assembly Bill AB 2449. The next meeting will be held on Thursday, September 28th, and information about that meeting will be posted on the Vision Zero website and also the City Clerk's website. The Walk Safe San Jose plan, which we have talked about before in T&E and in task force meetings, is happening now, and we're working with an equity steering committee as well as an internal technical advisory committee, and our consultants will be doing engagement with the public this year starting in May through roughly November. And finally, we want to touch on legislative updates. DOT works with Intergovernmental Relations, other California cities, and the California City Transportation Initiative to improve traffic safety through legislation. One bill that we wanted to note is the AB 645 bill, the Speed Safety Camera Bill, that recently passed the Transportation and Privacy Committees of the State Assembly and is going to the Appropriations Committee in mid-May. And that is it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the report. Let's start with public comment.
Blair?
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks a lot on the previous item, a good conversation on the future of grade separation issues along the peninsula. To consider the grade separation issues on the East Bay side, to bring those two concepts together can prove to be some interesting work for yourselves, hopefully. With that said, thank you for talking about Vision Zero this year, and it's just really nice to hear that traffic deaths are way down, and that's really nice to hear. As always, a real good luck that we have a real responsibility to be very clear about how to report Vision Zero death statistics, KSI statistics, I think they're called. We have been starting to count homeless people who are killed each year because of traffic deaths. We did not do that before. This is, 5 short years ago, we were not doing that. And we're trying to do that more now. And those numbers are getting mixed up in these larger numbers of Vision Zero death statistics each year. So we have to really be clear how we're talking about it. And we have to be really clear that we have to be considering, certain programs for our unhoused, how to address their deaths as well. That I know people like Gail Osmer are interested in and always can be wanting to talk to yourselves about. That boy, just another reminder how important that conversation is, and as important as public safety is, we have to be really, really clear how we talk about our statistics in the future, and really work towards an accountability of a community process, and that's part of the whole strategy of open public policies and public safety working together towards that good, positive, sustainable community harmony future we're working.
Rob Moore.
Hi there. Wasn't planning on speaking, but just thought I'd chime in real quickly. My name is Rob Moore. I'm a Los Gatos Town Council member, and I just want to thank you all for your attention to these important issues. This is something we're paying attention to really closely in Los Gatos, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for partnership along a lot of our shared roadways, especially places like Blossom Hill Road, where we've had recent fatalities. So thanks again. Look forward to working with you all on this important work.
Back to the committee.
Okay, Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just start out by really mentioning how much I appreciate staff for their important work on what I feel is a major responsibility of our city, which is to ensure the safety of our residents as they navigate their communities and neighborhoods. I'm excited to see the list of upcoming safety projects, both identifying Jackson Avenue and McKee Road in District 5. Both of those arteries have seen their share of, deadly crashes. So really excited to see that on the list. And then finally, I really want to thank staff for their outreach to our schools. As the former president of the Santa Clara County Board of Education, I think, making sure that our children, as they navigate to and from school, really is a shared priority of our city and our school districts. And there are many situations in which schools have interactions with youth or families where they can learn where these vulnerabilities are. So including them really creates a healthier and safer environment for all. And with that, I'd like to accept the report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other questions from colleagues. I'm going to ask a couple questions and just make a couple comments. I know we're all hit hard whenever we have any fatality. 2 of the 17 fatalities this year have been in District 4, actually, sadly, and often we see that many of them are not on the corridors that are identified as, these Vision Zero corridors. So I do appreciate that some of the effort is around improving driving habits, safe driving, putting up the reminders on how to behave, because a lot of the time, again, it's behavior of drivers or even pedestrians who aren't necessarily walking in crosswalks, and we have to figure out how to improve that. I do have a question about, the area, when these happen, the neighborhoods get particularly on high notice, and they get very stressed about thinking something's wrong on the street. And the one we had on Morill this year, the neighbors keep wanting more enforcement there. They talk about, they're watching now everybody who speeds and work with our office to try to get the traffic enforcement unit out. And I've been very happy that our captains work with me and send enforcement units out when there's a request in a street. But what we learned last week was an interesting thing I didn't know about before. And they said, we can't do traffic enforcement on Morill because the speed study hasn't been updated. So I just want to understand that a little better. What is the process that we have to follow before we can actually do enforcement on certain corridors? Because it surprised me. We have speed limits on streets, and I was surprised to hear that we have to wait for a study to be done before we can do enforcement there. I don't know who wants to answer that.
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen. Lam Cruz with the Department of Transportation. We're currently in the process, or we just hired a consultant to get our surveys up to speed. They're currently they have to be redone when there's roadway configuration on the street. During the COVID period, we did not collect speed surveys just because of the potential of, with faster speeds, people driving a little bit faster, we didn't want to have to raise the speed limit by law. So we waited, and now we have a consultant, and actually Marilla is one of the streets that are in our next work order to be updated.
Okay, so this is about understanding the difference between what our posted speed limit is and what the average driving speed is, so we know how to adjust. I mean, I'm trying to understand, what's the outcome of that speed study? How does it affect what happens next?
So typically a consultant will collect the 85th percentile of the street just to understand what the free flow speed of the roadway is. And by law, they would have to set the speed limit based off of, the roadway, what the free flow speed of the roadway is. So that's why we try to make improvements on a roadway to either calm, traffic by lowering the speeds, which would allow us to drop the speed limit. The good thing about our recent bill, AB 43, it does allow for streets that have, say high crashes to drop the posted speed limit by an additional 5 miles per hour.
So if the average driver drives faster than the posted speed limit, we may have to adjust speed limits up?
With the new bill, it actually does has a provision in there where we no longer have to do that.
Okay. But we can't ticket people yet if we haven't done that analysis.
Yeah, so that's why we're currently in the process of prioritizing mostly our Vision Zero corridors and our corridors that are expired where there are high fatal and severe injuries so that our officers can enforce by radar.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think the residents feel that they're being ignored when they ask for this kind of enforcement and are not getting it. And even from my perspective, and we know this to be true, that even just the visibility of somebody on the street often is a reminder to people, and they think it through for a long period after, as long as they're even just seeing somebody there. So I'll continue to work with our local captain about how we can get some visibility on some of these corridors.
Yeah, Lieutenant Sheriff here. Just one thing I want to add is not all the streets need updated surveys. There's quite a few of them that do, but a lot of the surveys were also extended
Maybe 43.
till
By 14 years.
By 14 years. So we are conducting enforcement for speed, and it really is what mechanism and how we're doing enforcement for speed really determines on whether we can issue the citation on 85% of what the average speed of the roadway is.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are places where enforcement's still happening, and that's why I was surprised that on a major street in our district we couldn't do enforcement. But that's why I just wanted to clarify that. Just one other question, or you had a weighted ranking you're using. I certainly appreciate that we're expanding, looking at where the high priority corridors are, not just by fatalities, because in my mind, actually, any accident, any place where there's a large number of accidents should be a place that we're focused on, regardless of the severity of injury, because we know that just a little bit higher speed or a little bit inches one way or the other could change something from an injury to a fatality. And even near misses are important. Where people are finding that they're almost getting hit by cars is also an indication that something may happen in the future. So I appreciate that we're expanding our definition. But I see that you're doing a weight, right, where you have a fatality counts 3 times as much, or fatality and severe injury, I guess, counting 3 times as much as a minor injury. I don't know if you want to clarify that. I'm just going to express my thought that I'm not sure that weight makes much difference, because as I said, the difference between an injury and a fatality, or an injury and a severe injury, might just be a circumstance and not necessarily an indication that this street is more safe. So just my thoughts on that. And I'd be curious to see some of the data as well. I mean, we always talk about fatality data, but we never really see the chart that shows us how many serious injuries are there, how many minor injury accidents. So maybe in a future report, having a table that similar to the one that shows us the trend of fatalities what are the trends we're seeing across the city on injury accidents and even accidents as a whole? I think that would be helpful to understand. All right, Councilmember Candelas.
Thank you, Chair. Brief comment. I mean, obviously, I want to thank staff for bringing this report to us and our update on our Vision Zero priorities. I think it's important to understand where we're putting our efforts as a city and where we're focusing on with regards to reducing pedestrian or incidents on the road. And so I guess one of the questions that I had is just, is it nationally that the trend is going up with like pedestrian fatalities in whole, or why can we attribute the jump, such a drastic jump from one year to the next?
Sure. Yes, it is nationally. There's a really interesting chart, and if you want to Google it, Google Governor's Highway Safety Association. And the chart shows that pedestrian fatalities specifically were dropping until 2009, and since 2009 in the country as a whole, pedestrian fatalities have been really, really steeply increasing. And the thing that happened in 2009 is smartphones. And so that has been, and so, the way that tends to be described in the industry is distraction. And there's certainly a lot of finger pointing around who is distracted. But I guess I would say it's all modes. And also the sort of notion of a smartphone, I think in 2009 was a discrete thing. And today, you have entire vehicles that are basically a steering wheel and a tablet. So I think that it's a little bit more involved today. Yeah. But nonetheless, I think it's, everyone's got notifications running. And one of the things that we can do as government is basically have billboard campaigns where we tell people not to run notifications on their vehicle, which is very common.
Great. Well, on that note, I know we just had Distracted Drivers Awareness Month in April, and I know because on the council, I think we did a proclamation for the month. But in addition to that, the outreach and engagement efforts that your office and DOT is doing, which is great. I see the signage throughout as I'm driving from event to event in my district. I'd also like to offer my office to help with the outreach and engagement. Because I mean, we also have a good portion of people that we reach on a daily or on our weekly basis because of the engagement that we do. So that's my comment with regards to outreach. And secondly, I think it's important that we are working with our schools. And again, I just want to echo. I mean, one of the middle schools in my district, Quimby Oak, we just had a child that was hit for the second child in a matter of 3 months. And so, so this is something that, Quimby Oak, they're very concerned about this, as am I. And so, while it's nice to get an update, it's our job to be realistic of making sure that we're, letting staff know that there's a lot of work to do on this. And I'm excited towards the progress that we're making, but, being mindful and realistic to the what's out there now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And around schools, it's definitely important for us to continue to do that education work. And some of the worst drivers we ever see are parents dropping their kids off at school, and especially if they're late. So anyway, and they get frustrated by all the traffic. They make U-turns where they shouldn't. There's all kinds of crazy things happening in front of schools. So I appreciate that we've done that effort with with safety outreach at schools, but also partnering with the traffic enforcement unit to be out in front of schools as often as possible in the mornings and afternoons during those crazy times. And without necessarily pointing fingers at anyone, and it clearly, I think, the smartphone use for both drivers and pedestrians has been a problem. I mean, pedestrians, I think, often are walking with their, and I'm not going to claim to be entirely innocent all the time, but pedestrians are often looking down at their phone while they're crossing streets, and that's, clearly a potential risk amplifier in that case. Anyway, I think that's it for our comments, so we'll move on to a vote to accept this report.
The vote's unanimous.
All right, thank you. Thanks, team, for the update. Our last item on the agenda, item 4, is our initiatives roadmap update report on the Beautify SJ vehicle blight. I think Khalid is going to start us off. Looking forward to the discussion on this one.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen, council members, and members of the public. My name is Khalid Tawfiq, Chief Information Officer with the Information Technology Department. I'm here joined by John Bristow, Director of Transportation, Heather Hoshi, DOT Division Head, and currently assigned to the Information Technology Department for the Vehicle Blight Special Assignment Project, Olympia Williams, Beautify SJ Division Manager, Parks Recreation and Neighborhood Services Department, and Zane Barnes, Chief Intergovernmental Relations Officer, City Manager's Office of Administration, Policy, and Intergovernmental Relations. We're here to present the Beautify San Jose Vehicle Blight Status Report. I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you, Khalid. Again, John Russo, Director of Transportation. This second slide gives a good idea of the disparate partners that we have throughout the city that deal with different areas of vehicle blight. And since the inception of San Jose 311, abandoned vehicles has been one of the most requested services. All of you have actually experienced that coming through your districts. Multiple departments, as shown in the slide, actually are involved in responding to and addressing these vehicle concerns. While many departments receive complaints through a variety of channels, DOT is tasked with responding to most of them, with the other departments providing supplemental support. Some of these existing workflows that we have been using, like tracking and customer communications, are happening through disparate systems, which we intend to actually streamline and improve on. There are many challenges influencing the vehicle blight situation in San Jose. For example, the significant volume of vehicles on city streets has led to an increase in competition for limited numbers of parking spaces throughout the city. In fact, what we do estimate is there's approximately 2.3 vehicles for every potential driver within the city, so that presents a lot of vehicles that we're now dealing with within the city. When called on to address the issues that these many vehicles cause, DOT's Parking Compliance Unit responds, enlisting a parking enforcement approach that is rooted in a deep commitment to empathy and equitable outcomes. These citations or tows are only initiated in situations where voluntary compliance cannot be gained, recognizing that these enforcement actions can have significant implications for the city's most vulnerable populations. And what I mean by that, in other words, that we're aware that the vehicles that we're considering enforcement on may be the only practical way that many people in the city can get to work and support themselves. So when we're considering enforcement, we need to take into those kind of considerations, not only following state law, but also how we're going to be, the implications of whatever enforcement actions that we may take on those people and their vehicles. Our team is aware of those impact enforcement actions have on helping to improve the condition of San Jose streets, as well as impacts felt by those who receive the enforcement actions. So we know it's an important job, making sure that the city is well enforced and blight taken care of, but there are some other implications that we need to take into consideration as we consider enforcement. I'm going to hand the next presentation off to Heather Hoshi.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, Chairman Cohen, committee members, and members of the public. My name is Heather Hoshi, and I'm the division manager with DOT, but as Khalid mentioned, I'm currently on a special assignment with ITD. The complexity and breadth of vehicle-related complaints has evolved in recent years and has been impacted by many and often compounding factors. A visible increase in the number of vehicles being used for shelter and demand for limited parking in densely populated neighborhoods is elevated the level of concern expressed by residents. Siloed systems, processes, and departments, coupled with enforcement and operational limitations, have tested the patience of those requesting services and looking to the city to take action. In addition, customer communications and our approach to educating stakeholders have fallen short, leaving customer expectations not in alignment with service deliveries. The culmination of these factors has resulted in very dissatisfied customers. The abandoned vehicle service has been the lowest rated San Jose 311 service for multiple years. In fiscal year 21-22, only 16% of customers rated the service as good or very good. Motivated by the City Initiative's roadmap for fiscal 22-23, the Mayor's March budget message, and poor communications satisfaction ratings, a multi-departmental vehicle blight process redesign project was initiated to gain a better understanding of vehicle-related issues and find comprehensive solutions to ensure true collaboration and satisfied customers. When embarking on the redesign journey, in order to ensure that we understood and solved for the right problems, the city used a human-centered design approach. This helped the team to keep the human perspective front and center during all steps of the redesign process. Bringing together constituents, city council staff, and the multiple city departments responsible for addressing vehicle-related complaints, user interviews and outreach was conducted. The process provided insight into customer pain points and perceptions about vehicle blight. One specific pain point identified during the human-centered design process was the community's frustration due to the lack of parking in some residential neighborhoods. According to DMV data, as of April 23, there are approximately 1.5 million vehicles registered in San Jose. Estimating that there are close to 656,000 San Jose residents that are of driving age and potentially licensed to drive, this implies that there are around 2.3 vehicles for every one driver living in San Jose. This high ratio does further influence the perception that there are a significant number of vehicles taking up parking in San Jose. The high volume of vehicles can have an impact on vehicle blight, parking occupancy, turnover, and the rate of illegal parking. In addition, of the 1.5 million vehicles, approximately 300,000, or 21%, have vehicle registrations that have been expired for longer than 6 months. Customers are utilizing the San Jose 311 abandoned vehicle reporting tool to alert the city of all types of vehicle-related issues, not just abandoned vehicles. Additionally, customers report vehicle-related issues to multiple departments through a variety of channels. To better understand the specific vehicle concerns and issues customers are reporting, staff reviewed reports from San Jose 311, DOT, PBCE, and SJPD. The tone and subject matter of customer concerns was very similar across all departments. A funnel analysis was completed, and the results you see here are based on DOT-specific data. Siloed systems and manual data collection methods made it difficult to compile a clean and full citywide data set. DOT data was singled out for use because it was the most complete, accessible, and accurate data set available. It is important to acknowledge that this data set gives us a look into what constituents are concerned about and reporting. However, it provides a narrow view of the volume of concerns expressed by constituents across all citywide service systems. Again, the types of concerns are well represented, but the volume of those concerns is understated here. The bubble diagram notes that for DOT, general illegal parking issues, including requests for parked vehicles over 72 hours, were by far the most voiced concerned at 75%. The number of complaints relating to lived-in vehicles noted by the red bubble is much smaller than likely expected, as it is specifically only vehicles parked on city streets and therefore does not depict the intensity level of concern that we know is being voiced strongly across multiple city departments and council offices. In listening to our customers through data, we divided their concerns into 3 categories in order to better design solutions that will work and ensure impact awareness. Starting at the far left of the slide, you will see an example of an abandoned vehicle. Approximately 12% of vehicles reported through San Jose 311 belong in this category. Concerns falling under this category tend to be less complex and display specific conditions, making them easy to identify. In addition, these concerns have direct and clear enforcement mechanisms and processes. They are typically towable vehicles. In the middle, you will see an example of an illegally parked vehicle. Approximately 72% of reported vehicles belong in this category. Concerns falling under this category tend to be more widely varied. For example, vehicles parked for 72 hours, at a red curb, fire hydrant, in a bike lane, or other general illegal parking concerns are included here. Per the California Vehicle Code, the only legal enforcement mechanism allowed for most parking violations is a citation. To the far right of the slide, you will see an example of vehicle blight or public nuisance. Approximately 16% of reported vehicles that do not have a direct tie to parking or other enforcement violation fall here. This can include nuisance concerns about dirty vehicles or vehicles with cosmetic damage, certain types of vehicles like a boat or a trailer or a motorhome, lived-in vehicles, or vehicles leaking waste or full of trash. While parking enforcement action often isn't legally feasible in these cases, options to help mitigate some of the reporting customers' angst may be available through referrals to vehicle blight partners. For example, a lived-in vehicle cannot be towed, but when referred to the housing department, outreach can be provided and services offered to the inhabitants. Additionally, if there is trash, illegal dumping, or bio-waste discharges occurring, referring the issue to Beautify San Jose can result in cleanup of the area. Overlaying the team's data analysis work with the human-centered design process, the 7 focus areas noted here were identified as improvement opportunity areas. It is expected that enhancements and updates that work to address these 7 key areas will have positive impacts on vehicle blight and customer service. In addition, it is anticipated that this work will encourage continued and hopeful elevated engagement and use of San Jose 311. Each of the 7 focus areas touched on identified stakeholder and customer pain points that are impacting customer usability, satisfaction, and outcomes. Creative solutions to address these challenges have been identified and prioritized by staff in several focus areas. Significant work is already underway. Let me walk you through the concern and in-progress solution that we anticipate will have substantial positive impact on customer satisfaction. Lack of investigation to reported concerns related to vehicles potentially stored on public streets or 72-hour complaints. DOT has initiated a limited pilot program focused on investigating vehicles reported as being stored on public streets. Through the pilot, we hope to be able to better understand several data points that we will use to develop a future long-term effective solution to this issue. Specifically, we are looking to understand outcomes. Will the program have notable impacts on vehicle blight and related issues? Will vehicles move? Will we be able to change driver behavior? What will the impacts that a full program may have on resources, and what impact will 72-hour investigations have with the issuance of citations versus tows, and how will that impact customer service? Additionally, the pilot will serve as an opportunity to test new vehicle qualifying criteria and other program framework. I'd like to introduce Olympia Williams with Beautify San Jose so she can speak to the progress being made on the city's approach to addressing lived-in vehicles.
Good afternoon, committee members. Currently, there is an interdepartmental group developing a recommendation on how to address lived-in vehicles when people are non-compliant with good neighbor rules. Examples of non-compliant vehicles may include personal items being stored on the sidewalks and streets, vehicles draining bio-waste onto streets or into stormwater drains, and other issues that may lead to the need to abate a vehicle. We will be returning to council in the next few months with more information on this. I'd now like to turn it over to Zane.
Good afternoon, Zane Barnes with the Office of Intergovernmental Relations. Policies, legislation, and legal approaches are being pursued for the following potential actions. A new parking program to prohibit the parking of certain vehicles parked or being stored on city streets. Consider revising the current approach to enforcing expired vehicle registration by adjusting the enforcement trigger to identify vehicles with registration expired over 6 months but less than 1 year. This could result in the issuance of additional citations and/or towing of vehicles, thereby increasing the rate of violation capture. 3, create an ordinance to define public nuisance and extreme blight, allowing for the immediate cleaning, towing, or junking of vehicles if the imminent threat is posed to life or property, including pedestrians, cyclists, vehicles, etc., and any associated enforcement programs and teams required to provide the service. 4th, establish a citywide lived-in vehicle enforcement enforcement options, and approach policy, including the addition of any necessary new or updated ordinances or municipal codes. The enforcement of lived-in vehicles is currently limited by the San Jose Municipal Code and California state law. Next slide. There are currently 2 bills that are working their way through the legislature that may impact our ability to act on vehicle blight. AB 1082 would prohibit towing due to unpaid parking citations, remove the authority to lien sale a vehicle to cover towing expenses, increase the threshold for a hold being placed on vehicle registration, as well as require payment plans for indigent persons. We are currently in communication with author's office on this legislation with the following concerns. The ability to place a hold at the DMV for 1 unpaid citation needs to stay. Making it 6 will make our enforcement efforts ineffective, which would translate into unsafe conditions on our streets and would impact ADA parking availability. The city has 2 different payment plans already for qualified individuals based on income. Opening up payment plans to non-indigent persons without consideration of income will create a reduction in local control over parking restrictions. We also recommend adding language that these changes do not apply to retail and commercial parking. Additionally, we recommend adding language that cities and counties may conduct immediate removal if immediate risk to pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists are evidenced. AB 925 also presents challenges and will require verification of vehicle registration from the DMV before enforcement action, with the earliest action being tied to at least a 6-month lapse in registration. This is less problematic compared to AB 1082 and may be less viable. We're continuing to be engaged on this legislation with our lobbying team and will closely monitor if this comes out of the Assembly Appropriations Committee. The biggest issue here may be the state mandated requirement that may increase costs for the city of San Jose. And with that, I'll pass on to Khaled.
Thank you, Zane. The cross-departmental vehicle blight team has concluded the process redesign phase and currently focused on developing the functional design for the new service request intake process. Small and medium enhancements are regularly implemented while focusing on the large enhancements by the end of this year. This approach allows us to test and measure the impact of new changes and make the necessary adjustment as needed. Our cross-departmental one team collaborated through several design workshops in the last 6 months to listen with empathy for resident voice, develop cross-departmental solutions, and focus on outcomes.
In addition to the extensive work done to analyze and understand constituent concerns and the human-centered design process, the team has begun working to implement improvements and enhancements along the way. Highlighted accomplishments include the completion of the re-engineering of San Jose 311 vehicle blight service delivery process, the expansion of abandoned vehicle investigation criteria, and warm handoffs between departments that have been already initiated, with handoffs to partners and outside agencies in phase 2. The team's most visual accomplishment to date, however, is the abandoned vehicles investigations outcome map. In order to provide more transparency to residents, we recently launched phase 1 of an abandoned vehicles investigations outcome map. Here, a constituent can type in their address and view vehicle abatement activity in a certain area. The map identifies where investigations have occurred and the results of those investigations. Did the vehicle comply with parking rules and regulations, or was it towed? Users can customize the map to see activities derived from proactive patrols or San Jose 311 service requests. Activity can also be filtered by specific council district. Phase 1 of the map includes a limited data set from July 2022 to December 2022. However, future phases will bring the data current.
We have advanced our dashboard capabilities to promote transparency and enhance our ability to recognize and track our progress. We launched the customer satisfaction dashboard in March of this year and added the abandoned vehicle investigation outcome dashboard last week. As anticipated, the enhancements initiated by the team are already improving customer service satisfaction scores. As indicated on the bottom right graph of the San Jose 311 performance dashboard, there is an upward trend in the customer satisfaction scores for abandoned vehicles services from 14% in June of 2022 to 29% in March 2023. The April customer satisfaction report was updated this morning, and we gained another 1% since March, bringing the customer satisfaction rate to 30% to date. We are encouraged by the continuous improvement achieved in the customer satisfaction over the last 9 months and realize that more work is needed to achieve our goals. This concludes our presentation, and staff is available for questions and feedback.
All right. Thank you. Let's go to public comment first.
Paul?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. First of all, I'd like to reference the urbanization. There was a very clear causative effect, not a correlation, but a causative effect. Because in your presentation, you stated urbanization was the title, and then you said increased lived-in vehicles. So you made the connection, not me. This is not my opinion. This is your fact. So now that we have this link in this causative effect between urbanization and increase in vehicles, you have to assume responsibility within the Planning Commission because you are the ones that are increasing the market rate density and market rate housing, pushing those through at 95 to 115% every single year, year after year. So start assuming some responsibility for that because you just made the connection. That's number one. Number two is that how is this going to be tied in with Boise versus Martin versus Boise? You see, because city streets, it qualifies under Martin versus Boise. So you're going to have some lawsuits, man, coming. So prepare for that. Beautify SJ is going to be on the hook for it too, because they're going to be named in that lawsuit because you're violating Martin versus Boise. Number three, leave AB 1082 alone. Just leave it alone. You're not going to challenge Ashkalra because this has been vetted by some people that are experts in this. Obviously, you're not. You have the developers are the ones that are running this city. They're running this council too. So I don't care about what developers want. I don't care about your clean energy. We need to get these cars off the road. I really don't care about it. So leave AB 1082 as written. And how do you define
Blair?
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks for the words of Paul on the previous item. For myself, or on this item, I guess. For myself, I would like to. I was pretty busy on this item, doing things, and I will review it definitely. What is interesting me to myself about this item is how it can relate to the future of safe parking encampment issues for RVs and where that stands. And again, as I mentioned on the previous item, Gail Osmer could be a really good source to be facilitating conversation and dialogue about what is best for the future of where exactly good RV encampments can go. I think yourselves that a few weeks ago you had an item on unhoused issues that was just really strangely, sorely lacking any sort of a city staff presentation. That I hope this is an item that's trying to make up to that. And we have to be able to talk about safe parking issues and the importance of city-sponsored sites. And however the conversation is, I hope that was being accomplished on this item today, and can be talked about in the upcoming council discussion, committee discussion. Other than that, thanks for your time.
Back to the committee.
All right, I just want to thank staff for the report on this sort of high visibility, low satisfaction item. I mean, the community is very, very interested in this, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing to try to address the concerns. All right, let's go to colleagues. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for all your hard work to create a transparent and streamlined solution and process for vehicle blight. Vehicle blight is a major concern in my district, East San Jose. Every day, my staff receives phone calls from residents, whether it's abandoned vehicles, lived-in vehicles, vehicle-related blight. It's something that comes up in, coffee meetings and everything, so I appreciate your work on this. I'm excited to see a pilot for handling bio-waste and excess trash regarding lived-in vehicles, because that's also something I get calls for as well. It's important to me that we find a way to address blight and health concerns regarding lived-in vehicles in our neighborhoods while also avoiding treating our unhoused neighbors with cruelty, obviously. It says on the report that the pilot started in March. Has there been any early observations or lessons learned since then?
Can you clarify which pilot you're referring
The
to?
pilot for the bio-waste and vehicle, lived-in vehicles.
Yes, so we launched a pilot program to address lived-in vehicles, really focusing on bio-waste and trash around those lived-in vehicles. The program started the first 24 days. We collected about 11,000 gallons of waste that needed to be disposed of. So we were able to get that off sidewalks, streets, and other containers. What we also did is work with people to provide appropriate containers, because oftentimes people may have a gray water or black water tank that's not working properly at this time. So we provided additional containers that people can use for waste so that we can pick it up on a regular basis and ensure that this doesn't end up on our streets, going down the storm drains or on the sidewalks.
Thank you. Thank you. And has there been any, how long has the pilot been active? Have you learned anything?
We just started March 13th.
Oh, March 13th.
What we've learned is that people are extremely appreciative of the service. It takes care of the person that's unhoused living in a vehicle, and it also takes good care of the neighborhood or businesses where people may be living. So it's probably one of our most popular services that we provide.
That's great. No, thank you. Appreciate that. Also, in regards to proactive patrolling, can you give me just a little bit more details of what proactive patrolling looks like in the field?
Sure. Parking compliance officers patrol every city street approximately every 14 or so days, looking to identify vehicles that meet current vehicle abatement criteria, and then will initiate an investigation. As part of our beautify our blight work, we have re-envisioned that program and identified that there are areas that we probably don't need to patrol on such a frequent basis, and that there are areas that need additional patrols. So we are in the, DOT is in the process of redeploying those proactive patrols to increase frequency in high need areas and reduce frequency in the lower need areas.
Yeah, parking is another one of those hot button issues that I get in neighborhood association meetings. People, in East San Jose, there is no parking. People are parking on lawns, they're parking on sidewalks, and a lot of it is the residents. So it's kind of hard to develop a pathway forward when the individuals we'd be holding accountable are the people who live in the neighborhoods we're trying to make safe and clean. Could you tell me a little bit in regards to the vacancy rate for the parking compliance program? Or do we have a large vacancy rate for those staff?
The PCU has struggled with a significant vacancy rate, bouncing around anywhere between. During COVID, it was in the low 20s, and it is right now in the 15% range.
Oh, okay.
So improving. Unfortunately, they seem to take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back during each hiring cycle, but they are committed and they have a continuous posting for hiring of officers and have worked really hard to improve and expedite those processes to ensure we're getting quality candidates through the door as quickly as possible, and then getting them trained in the field as quickly as we can.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then finally, on the need for a new lived-in vehicle enforcement ordinance, definitely something I'm interested in learning more about. I know these discussions are still early in the process, but can any more details be shared about what the end-all be-all goal of the ordinance would be?
So we have an interdepartmental group that's working closely together to craft how do we both educate people about when we need them to make changes, for example, not letting bio-waste out into the street, right? So really focus on an education, but also saying in those very limited situations when and if we ever needed to tow or remove a vehicle, what would be that criteria? We don't anticipate that being kind of the norm. That would be more of a one-off. We're really looking to take an education and outreach approach to helping people kind of come into compliance. Like, we have a trash program. We want you to bag your trash and we'll pick it up. We want you not to let bio-waste out onto the streets. We want you to store things inside of your vehicle, or I always tell people, or attached to your vehicle, but not on the sidewalks and streets.
I appreciate the concept of this ordinance, because we do see a lot of individuals storing bikes, trash on the street, and like residents call me and they're like, oh, what are you doing about this RV? And it's like, we don't have a towing policy, but then also it's like we don't have any other policy to hold the individual accountable. And if you own a home, you know, you can't just build a deck without including the city. So how can there be like lived-in vehicles without having the city somewhat have an ordinance? So I'm really looking forward to that as it moves forward. Is there anything in this conversation of lived-in vehicles? What I have in my district, we just did a great project on San Antonio for a bike lane, and then boom, RVs up and down San Antonio parked right in the bike lane. So is there any thoughts in regards to like lived-in vehicles, if they're essentially blocking transit infrastructure, and what we may do in that situation?
Yeah, so as part of our group, we are looking at situations such as that. Like I say, our first strategy is always to try to work with the person, and usually the teams will go out and say, can you move up 4 feet and you're outside of the bike lane? And most people will work with us in those situations. We have found that cooperation tends to work, but then we're also saying what would need to be done if people didn't want to comply with those types of things.
All right, no, I appreciate that, and I'm interested, you know, to hear the thoughts of my colleagues. I know that this is a huge topic of discussion in my area, so yeah, appreciate this conversation and looking forward to it moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. Before I acknowledge Councilmember Davis, just want to remind the group that this motion requires accepting the report and cross-referencing it to council on May 16th.
Thank you. Thank you all for this report and the presentation and all the work that has gone into it. I have one clarifying question before I get into kind of the more details. For on slide 6, when you were talking about all registered vehicles, is that trailers, RVs, boats, motorcycles, not just cars and trucks?
Yes, anything requiring a registration with the DMV.
Okay, thanks. Good to know. And then on slide 11, I just want to make sure I understand the different colors with the policies for, I think it was slide 11. The different policies for input. Yeah. If we could bring that up.
The 3x3.
And while that's being pulled up, I want to ask Olympia a little bit more detail about the lived-in vehicle ordinance. So you talked in terms of the scope about bio-waste, trash requirements, how to store items, and then compliance, or kind of parking compliance when towing might be needed and what that would look like. Is that the extent of the scope? Are there other items that would, I mean, that's pretty comprehensive. I just want to check the rest.
Those are the areas. So I want to say that I'm not sure if this will be an ordinance or a policy at this time. We are bringing that recommendation forward. Though the areas that you outlined are the areas that we're focused on at this particular time around lived-in vehicles.
Okay, and what's the timeline on bringing that back to council?
So we're looking at coming in the next few months. I would say be late summer, early fall.
Okay. I just want to echo Councilmember Ortiz's enthusiasm for having that come back to us. I think that has been a huge source of consternation, I will say, with my residents and a lot of calls to our office. In addition to that, I wanted to talk about so I just want to make sure I understand in this 3x3, as Rob was calling it, are the blue ones items that are underway, or items that you're wanting our feedback on, or can you just be a little bit more clear about this slide and what the color means?
Yes. The ones highlighted in blue are the ones that we would like feedback from committee and then ultimately council on to help us frame the direction you would like us to pursue. The others are items that are needing discussion, but are also potentially started already.
Okay. Great, because when I saw the prohibition on vehicles on trails, I thought we already had taken care of that.
That's correct. I believe it is prohibited to put a vehicle on a trail, but the issue is keeping that from happening more than the actual illegal act of having the vehicle on there. It's how do we prevent that from happening in the first place versus once it's there, we can address it.
Okay, got it. And we're working on that. I believe there's items coming in the next budget about kind of hardscaping prevention of that.
I believe that is correct, yes.
Okay. Regarding restricting the types of unpowered vehicles on city streets, are we talking about the 72-hour rule, or are we talking about like never having a boat on the street?
So those vehicles, if parked on the street, are hold to the 72 hours. So that already includes those types of vehicles. This would be additional levels of prohibition for those types of vehicles being on the street for any particular reason, or maybe only during active loading and unloading of your personal RV or your boat, getting it ready to go or come back from a trip or something like that. That is what we're looking at, an additional layer.
Okay, so maybe under 24 hours kind of a thing?
Potentially.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Can we talk a little bit about, I know, I can't remember who was addressing this, but following up on vehicles that have been reported, that's been something I hear about a lot in my office. When they say there was no follow-up with them, or that the request was closed, but nothing had happened. They could still see the car right out there and it's under a thick layer of dust, for example. What's happening with the communication piece?
So we are looking to deploy significant enhancements to the communication piece, both in setting expectations up front for customers and then through the process. So one of the items that we're looking at is a kind of, what do we call it? If we close the case, they give the constituent the opportunity to reopen and provide additional information. Another option would be for us to communicate through enhanced notifications when they are putting in the service request. So communicating if this vehicle has been recently investigated, what the outcomes of that were, allowing customers to kind of piggyback on already existing service requests to get those updates, because sometimes to reduce duplication in the current system, if we're already investigating that vehicle through a different reporting party, we won't open a new request, but that individual then doesn't get those notifications and doesn't know what's going on with that investigation. So we're looking at allowing individuals to be notified that there's an investigation already going on and the opportunity to kind of piggyback on it and then be privy to those investigation notes and those communications as well.
Okay, and so what's the timeline for that?
We have not created a complete timeline on when all of these enhancements will be initiated, but we're hoping by the end of the calendar year, significant work will be in progress for those.
Okay, so you're hoping to start work by the end of the year?
No, that progress will continue, and by the end of the year, they will be implemented.
If I can jump in, there are a couple things. We have already implemented some of the enhancements. We're piloting one of the options to allow the public to reopen a closed ticket, which they believe might be were closed prematurely. So we're doing a pilot just to see what would be the impact, and then we're also looking to see how we can enhance the system to make it more intuitive for them to rebuttal or to provide additional information. I think some of the other things that we're looking at is some of the requirements for investigation. There are a lot of restrictions that we're trying to ease some of the restrictions to widen the window where vehicles will be investigated more frequently. I think the memo has already stated that we're adding more capacity to investigate up to 10,000 additional incidents per year. So I think all of that is going to increase our ability to respond and improve. Some of them that we can do now, and we are doing it without requiring the system enhancements. Some of the just collaboration, some of them manually for the 311 call center to receive and triage, and some of them that require a little bit longer. Our goal to complete the 15 items that we listed for enhancements by the end of the year, and we're going to make hopefully some progress as we can see. And as we have indicated, some of the enhancement that we made already is paying off, and we're seeing some positive results. Not something that we can brag about yet, but the hope is to keep pushing to implement smaller ones and medium and large ones in the near future.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm running out of time, but I just want to say, I think, okay. The chair told me I get extra time. I think the communication piece has been extremely difficult, and the frustration level when someone sees a car stay in the same spot or maybe move 3 feet backwards or forwards for weeks or months on end, that frustration level is high and it just ramps up. And a car that is parked for a long time might not be blight when it starts out, but it attracts, it just, if it's there from the summer to the fall and leaves come down and trash accumulates around it just by virtue of there not being able to be street sweeping in that spot, and they report it and nothing happens, which this has happened in multiple areas. I've gotten lots of emails about this. That interaction with the city when they report it and it's closed and nothing happens and they can still see it and it's getting worse day by day is not a positive interaction with the city. And then they call our office or they email our office and they say, I think I did everything right. I reported it. It was closed, but nothing happened. And we have to communicate back to them, yes, because it doesn't fit the criteria. That can't be the right answer. And so I don't understand how on slide 11, that process is changing in any way, other than communicating to them that it just doesn't meet the criteria and we just have to educate people about that. But that's not, they see the 72-hour ordinance and they see it not being enforced. And they have literally told me, well, I get the sense that speeding isn't enforced and the 72-hour rule isn't enforced, and what is being enforced? And so how are you going to address that?
So we are piloting the 72-hour enforcement. DOT is currently doing a pilot to understand what the outcomes of that and deploying that on a larger scale would look like, what resource it would take, what impacts it would have to the streets and customer service ratings. So we anticipate that with some additional staffing through the Abandoned Vehicle Reserve Fund, that we will be able to add some additional contract staff to allow for 10,000 more investigations annually. And we will use that to, again, kind of mold and figure out what the best approach to the 72-hour enforcement piece is, and then hopefully be able to deploy a larger program based on what we learn from the pilot.
So what's the timeline on the pilot?
So the pilot is currently underway. It just started at the beginning of this month. So I think last month. So, oh gosh, it's May already, sorry. Last month, we've done about 100 investigations so far. So it's very early in the stage. And we will go through the end of this the end of this fiscal year, and then that funding hopefully will be available starting next fiscal year to ramp up to 10,000 more investigations for the year. So in the next couple of months, we will have an idea of kind of the impact on the streets, the impact to customer service, impact to resources, and how we will move forward from there.
Okay, so will you be coming back to us in August or September with the results of the pilot? You're doing April, May, June.
Yeah, the plan is to come back and represent the finding in about 6 months or so, and we can coordinate that.
Okay.
If I can address the question a little bit a different way, there are two types of vehicles that we can address. Ones that qualify for citation or towing, and those who don't qualify because there is no legal way for us to address them. The increase in staffing and contractors to do about 10,000 more investigations will allow us to address the ones that we can enforce more. So we should see some improvement from that perspective. The ones we cannot address because legally there's nothing we can do because they're not violating anything, we are improving our communication by, number one, the map that we demonstrated for the performance, so at least people can see that we have activities and we are demonstrating that we are doing something about it. There are some restrictions and legal limitation to what we can do. And the second part, we are looking to ways to take a picture before and after, just to show them that the car did move, or we couldn't find enough evidence to take actions. And we're hoping through that process that the improved communication will at least bring understanding and education to the public. And hopefully that will make him more understanding and more accepting of the results.
Rob, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just to kind of put it all in a package. So the 10,000 hours do pair with heavier citation. So we are going to use the citation mechanism more often and more loudly. We are also going to broaden those criteria so that we are going to try to enforce more. There's never been kind of a reconciliation between the criteria we use and how effective it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something we're going to come back to you for feedback on. Part of it is rebuttals as well in the capacity, and this is in the budget for the 311 area to focus customer service contacts through the customer service arm of the city, and that being 311 plus being able to keep the data and saying where we're being effective and not. There is a piece of communication and education because there are some cases where there's a lot of cases where we see people just don't like where people park or their cars, and in those cases we do have to tell people that it is legal, that the streets usage is for everyone. Continuous improvement with compassion is one we're going to have to really work on. The legislative one is where we take your feedback and say we're going to push on some ordinance changes such as the public nuisance, bio-waste, waste in street and sidewalks and those types of things, but take council's voice and tweak how we approach things as long as we stay within the legally okay realm, but to kind of tweak our processes and thresholds. There's also an intensity on or focus on intensity areas, so where there is more complaining by multiple people in certain areas, they're going to hear that, and they're also not going to hear, that's not us, call it another city department, which we've heard from council is supremely frustrating. And then coming back to T&E was the plan in the next work plan to come back twice to you to say how are we tracking legislatively, operationally, educationally, all these different pushes. Is it hitting home, or where do you want us to continue to focus more differently?
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate it. And I don't think we've had a motion yet, so I'll move approval and include the referral to the full council.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. And I appreciate that Councilmember Davis left the easy question for the end. Because I was going to be the broken record that I feel like I am every time we hear this report, and just talk about, I think, the disconnect between the expectations of the residents and what our enforcement is. And I know that was just that line of questioning, but I still feel like we're not quite there. I hear statements like were said, and I appreciate this. I mean, there's certain criteria that we've been using for towing, and we say, well, this person wasn't violating anything. Well, except for the 72-hour ordinance. I mean, that is a violation of an ordinance. So it's really hard for those of us who have to respond to constituent concerns on a daily basis when they say to us, well, we've been told this isn't a violation, but this vehicle has been here for 6 weeks and hasn't moved, right? So there's a disconnect, and it puts a lot of us in a very difficult position. most of the people who are calling and saying that to us aren't as nice as the one that apparently Councilmember Davis heard from, who said, I think I did everything right. No, that's not what they're saying to us. They're saying to us, I reported this vehicle and it's been here for 6 weeks and you're not doing your job, right? I mean, so I still want to understand, what is it that we need to do from an ordinance standpoint and a city standpoint to make sure that we're being consistent and clear and also following our rules. I've been torn in my own head about what the right approach is, because we could say, well, look, if we're not going to enforce this, we ought to change the ordinance. On the other hand, we want to send the message to residents, you really shouldn't leave vehicles more than 72 hours. As somebody who got a ticket when I lived in Berkeley 30 years ago for parking on the street on street sweeping day, where they actually enforced that rule about allowing the streets to be swept, it's frustrating to live in a place that, we have a rule that says you shouldn't park on street sweeping day. Half the people don't know when that day is, but the ones who don't move their car, we just have areas that don't get swept, right? It's frustrating to not be able to figure out how to adequately enforce the rules that we have. So I don't know if there's an answer right now. I seem to express this each time. I know many of us here have done that, but.
And if you can, Heather, can you step through what the 72-hour enforcement process looks like from when the resident sees it into the kind of the timeline?
Absolutely. So we receive a service request in. The team reviews the service request, triages it via the pictures and the information provided. If it qualifies, it is then sent to an officer. So that's the next day probably. Then the officer responds and attempts to locate the vehicle in the field. If it's located, we leave a warning notice on the vehicle indicating that these are the potential violations and giving you a warning and explaining how to comply with the rules and regulations that they may be in violation of. They collect evidence, and then no less than 72 hours later, they return to the vehicle. We are not aggressively enforcing, so that is usually around a 5-day return. On that day, if they locate the vehicle and it has demonstrated that it's in violation, it can be towed or cited depending on the violation. If it's in compliance, then we close out the case. So the time span of that can be between around 12 days, depending on when the service request came in, and weekends and holidays that could stretch to 14. But that's the approximate timeline for it.
And that timeline makes sense to me, and certainly I'm okay with communicating that. I think the part of it that was sort of parenthetical in your statement was the if it qualifies, right? As far as, I understand what that means, right? If the vehicles have certain additional criteria beyond just having been parked on the street, blight, registration tags that are outdated, smashed windows, inoperable, whatever, all those things. But if it doesn't meet those criteria, it's still in violation of an ordinance that says they can't be there for 72 hours. So I'm just curious about whether, or I guess what I'm asking for is some messaging from the city as to what we really should be telling residents about what the rules are, so that it's clear that yes, we're trying to encourage people to move their vehicles, but in reality, they can drive their vehicle around the block and come back and it's legal. Or in reality, we're not going to even hold them to that requirement, because we either we can't because it's just too many vehicles to do that for. We also want to be sensitive to the issues that are real in many neighborhoods where there just aren't other places to put cars. We need to be honest. All I've been saying, we need to be honest with the residents, and I think we need to think through what that honesty looks like. It's not clear to me what that honesty looks like. I don't want to send a blanket statement out to everybody. It's free for all now. You don't have to move your vehicles. On the other hand, I don't believe we're ever going to be 80% satisfaction on the abandoned vehicle line as long as we are not enforcing an ordinance that we have that says you can't leave your vehicle in front of my house, right? That's what it is for most people, is there's a vehicle in front of my house. So that's the part I hope that we'll think about as a city, and what we're going to do about that.
And Chair, I'll mark that down for us to have a treatment of that when we come back to council in the presentation.
Okay, thanks. A couple other questions on some of the other items. RV parking and bio-waste has been a big issue, and we have one in our vehicle and one in our district that seems to be dumping regularly right on one of the streets, and we get the report. I know that there was before this issue of, well, it's a different department has to deal with it. We've had trouble communicating with the residents around where this vehicle is dumping on the street, there's not really, no department knows who's supposed to come and take care of this. Sounds like we're getting better at that, and I hope that'll improve. It seems to me that when that's happening, that's almost an emergency situation, that we shouldn't, when we are informed this dumping is happening, we should have a strike team that gets out and deals with it really quickly. Especially we had, the rains earlier this year. We would hear about dumping. We would be told 2 days later that it's still happening, and the rains are washing it into the storm sewer, right? I mean, to me, when we report to DOT that there's electrical lines being tapped into off of a pole, within 1 day, someone's out there dealing with that because that is a safety hazard and an emergency. I think that dumping hazardous waste on the street near storm sewers should rise to that level of response. So just some input on that item. And the last thing I'm going to ask, second to last thing I'm going to ask about, there's this trade-off between our lived-in vehicles, RVs, and where they're parking, and some safety that comes from that. Obviously, if they're in a crosswalk, they're on red curb in front of a fire hydrant. What is our policy? We can't just say, well, they're in front of a fire hydrant, but because it's a lived-in vehicle, we can't do anything about it, right? What do we do in those cases?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember. So if someone's in front of a fire hydrant or red zone, usually those calls typically go to SJPD, and PD will usually have the person move back, move forward, move back, or find another area. If they happen, when the BSJ team is out and they're servicing a vehicle, picking up trash or bio-waste, and we see someone's close to a fire hydrant or red zone, they educate them on, you can't be here, you can be towed, you cannot be in these areas or parked across the sidewalk. We find that most of the time people will move because they don't want to risk losing their home, their vehicle.
Okay. And the extension of that for me is when vehicles are blocking the visibility of people pulling out of driveways and around corners. And we have the example in our part of the district where we have all those vehicles along an industrial street, but cars are trying to pull out of parking lots, and because of all the RVs there, they can't see what's coming down that street. So I'm just wondering if we should do some analysis as well about what kind of regulation should we have about where vehicles can park and where we're going to address an issue that might be more than just an inconvenience, but a real safety concern.
So I'll tell you, when we get those issues around line of sight, I usually just reach right out to our partners in DOT because they're able to assess that and determine, like, is this vehicle in a place where there's a line of sight. We'll continue to work closely with DOT on those particular issues.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing, I was very interested by that data about how many vehicles there are registered in the city for driver. I mean, it's crazy. It's not per household. Those are 2.5 vehicles per licensed driver in theory. And I'm curious if we can at some point disaggregate that data. This is kind of a peripheral thought, but we talk a lot about how younger residents and don't have as many vehicles. Can we sort of start to learn maybe about age and all that so we can understand how our parking ordinances and other things need to be adjusted? Because we tell our residents when we eliminate parking minimums, for example, don't worry, people don't have as many cars now as they used to. But when you hear data that says there's 2.5 cars per registered driver, I wonder if we're being honest with ourselves about where all those cars are going to go.
Thank you for the question. We are trying to get the full data set from the DMV so we can do our full analysis to see the type of cars, business or private motorcycles and things like that. We are restricted to what the DMV is willing to share with us, but that's definitely what we're planning to do. The 2.3 per user or per driver ratio raises more questions than provides answers, but we are kind of glad that we encountered something that we feel that there's something behind it, and further analysis hopefully will give us the full story.
And as my illustrious colleague here pointed out, obviously they're not all personal vehicles, but it just raised a curiosity in my mind about whether we can learn more from that data by diving into it a little more deeply. So I appreciate that. I think that's it for my questions. I know that I'm sure in a couple weeks we're going to have a vigorous discussion with the entire council, so we'll leave the rest for then and move on to a vote.
My screen's frozen for some reason. Can I just do a verbal yes?
Grace, you want to do oral?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and call out then for anyone online. So, Candelas?
Yes.
Ortiz?
Aye.
Davis?
Yes.
Cohen?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye. Yes, we did. All right, I guess that's our last item, so now we'll go on to open forum.
Paul?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. Thank you for an excellent meeting. I'm going to be referencing this when this comes up to council. I really hope that I did not hear, because it troubled me, that there was a rationale that was given by District 4 that somehow or another people looking on their phones might have been responsible for their death. That was very, very troubling to hear from this committee, that a rationale was actually provided to give justification for their murder on the street. Secondly, I would ask District 6 representatives to never challenge my memory again. I have, like I said, I think it's been already noticed by now by previous council members that I have a photographic memory. So any documents that I read, I can log and I can reference them at will. And I attend probably more meetings than all of you combined in the past couple of years. I literally go and attend every single meeting. So I'm equipped with information that you don't have. And so please don't ever try to challenge me publicly like that again, because as you were today, you'll be embarrassed and you'll be shown that I understand what is happening to my city. It's genocide with manners is what's happening. And it's done with the cooperation of certain members of this particular committee that think that they are, they're just self-promoting. The politicians here are promoting themselves, and it'll be kind of exposed, you know, in the near future. So don't think that you're getting away with anything, because you're not. We see it, and you're going to be called out on it. Thank you.
Blair?
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I hope it was noticed this past weekend that I guess it started Friday that the governor is starting to bring in CHP and National Guard to the city of San Francisco to address fentanyl issues. And I think some of that is supposed to return down in San Jose as well. They said is with the intention that they want to get high-end persons, but it really offers the risk that they're going to be nailing people at the local level who maybe shouldn't have to be nailed. I've been trying to figure out conversation and talking points on this subject. I think it's really important that people don't get hurt and that we really concentrate our thinking on what is our institutions, like our police departments, our hospitals, and put a focus on how distribution from those places is possibly having a pretty large effect of fentanyl distribution overall in local communities. It's a tough subject, but I think if we want to address it, that's the more honest approach in how to address where we're at right now, and that I think could possibly plug several leaks and make things work towards that better future of how to address fentanyl overall. And so, good luck with that. And at the local level, what about the idea of fentanyl test strips along with Narcan? I think the test strips to test if fentanyl is in someone's drugs can be a great helpful tool that I hope we can talk more about, get more accessibility for the public about. And I had some comments about my rules, how at the rules in open government, all the weird things that happened. I want to be forgiving about it. I hope we can talk more about that in the future. And I want to do good practices. I don't want to hurt things, so I don't want to be hurt in return. Thanks.
Back to the committee.
All right, thanks everyone. Meeting's adjourned.